All right. Hello, everyone present, and also all those who are out there following us virtually. Welcome to the Corporate Culture and Conflict Resolution session. We're happy to have you here with us today. And we'll just do by introductions, a quick intro. We can go to the next slide, please. All right, next slide. Are you there? Okay, great. Thank you. So I'll go ahead and start off with the introduction, if you don't mind, Sam. My name is Al Durr. I'm the CEO of ALD and Associates, and my background is over, I guess, 3 decades is a nicer way to say it, versus 30 years of service throughout the military, but also working in the EEO circles and also leadership development. I'm really a CEO of ALD and Associates, and I'm also an adjunct professor at George Mason University. Now I'll turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Sam.
Yes, my name is Sam Dahlia. 31 years in the Marine Corps, retired as a colonel. Specialized in those 31 years recently in family mediation, county mediation, as well as workplace disputes mediation. I received my Bachelor of Science degree in North Georgia College, then my master's degree in business, my MBA from Webster University, as well as arts in human resources development and the Master of Arts in human resources management from Webster University. I was formerly head of equal opportunity for the Marine Corps. I am currently a Florida Supreme Court certified family as well as appellate mediator. I've mediated over 300 plus cases. I'm also the owner of AJD Mediation and Consultation Services. And some of the other things that I've also done is I've also been a branch manager for Norwest Financial, manager for Pepsi Bottling Group in the past. And I also serve in the community as a mentor to small businesses in the local community. And I also assist in evaluating mediator trainees at the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute at Patrick Space Force Base in Florida. I will now turn it back over to Al, so Al can go ahead and start this presentation.
All right, next slide, please. All right, let's just take a moment and have a moment of reflection. I've been doing conflict resolution, or actually learning the craft of conflict resolution for, I guess, since my early teenage years. One of the examples, think about a moment when you've had a situation where you had a disagreement or an intense conversation with a loved one, a coworker, or a colleague. And I remember back, it's been 25 years now, prior to getting married, that my wife and I went through that marriage counseling to help us to be more effective in our communication. And the pastor giving us the class had told me one day, Al, in order to effectively kind of manage the house and conflicts, sometimes you'll have to apologize even if you think that you're not wrong. So I heeded his advice, and we went home, and a couple of weeks later, we went back to our session. And my wife and I my fiance and I were not talking to each other. And we sat in the room, and the pastor said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, sir, I followed your advice." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I did what you said to apologize, even if I didn't think I was wrong." And he said, "Well, how did you do it?" I said, "Well, dear, sorry, off." But lesson learned, had I better understood what conflict resolution back then was, I probably wouldn't have had such a tough couple of weeks. But we've evolved from that. So we go to the next slide, please. So our time today, we're going to really focus on just from the fruit to the root of issues and giving you some skills to effectively engage and handle conflict as it approaches you or as you're in the midst of it. And when we talk about from the fruit to the root, we really think about oftentimes we see the behaviors and the actions of individuals, but we don't know where they're from. And as we get through a process later on in this workshop, Sam is going to give you some very unique insights and some tactical tools to be able to engage conflict at the lowest level. Let's go to the next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about why conflict matters, right? So first of all, let's just be clear. Conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. It's not about if, it's when it happens, right? But I also would say that conflict isn't always a negative thing. It's an opportunity to bring clarity to a situation, to create greater opportunities for innovation. So I would encourage you to not look at it as something to dread, but an opportunity. But it's only an opportunity in the way that you process it. So we'll understand how that helps us not only to become a better communicator and a leader, but a better member of your family as well as your community. Let's go to the next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Sam for a few of his insights.
Some of the key concepts of uh, informal conflict resolution, which is where we will spend a lot of our time today. One of them is it has to be voluntary. The parties has to be willing to engage into the resolution process for it to be effective, for it to be successful. It also has to be impartial. The individuals who are discussing or who are going through this process of the informal conflict resolution, it has to be ensured that it's a fair process. Because if the process isn't fair, then obviously the individuals, the result of it, they may not keep to that result. If someone knows something is fair, then they're more likely to abide by whatever the agreement is. Find another thing it has to be confidential. Parties should be able to resolve their disputes without having to worry about it being in the public domain, if you will. And that's why one of the things that makes it successful. And finally, it has to be flexible, because the ability to be flexible, it also be able to handle to different parties, which may vary, the different conflicts, which may, so it has to be a flexible process. Next slide. There are numerous benefits to conflict resolution. One of it, especially, is cost effective. Think about having to have a discussion with an individual you have conflict with, vice having it to go to some kind of workplace proceedings while you're at work. It also has to be efficient as far as your time is concerned. You're able to resolve conflicts a whole lot faster. You have to, let's say someone took legal proceedings against you, or let's say even workplace proceedings. It has to be able to assist in the preservation of relationships. It's less confrontational. Someone take you to court, or if someone took you to this workplace proceedings, now you may have some disagreements or some animosity to that individual. So informal conflict resolution is able to give you that ability. Control. The controls of the parties themselves. You don't have anyone making a decision for you. There are no winners and losers. Both parties are in control of the process. And of course, we talked about flexibility. Next slide. However, conflict resolution is not without its challenges. And we have to understand that. And one of the challenges is enforceability. How are you going to enforce this agreement? Now, if it's a verbal agreement, it's one thing. But if it's not a verbal agreement, the best way to do it is having a written agreement. Or in some cases, if it's that important, or if it's a family issue, or let's say even if it's a conflict within something that goes to the courts, you can have those things filed, and that would assist you. But one of the limitations, the biggest limitations on informal conflict resolution is enforceability. You have to be aware of the imbalance of power. Individuals are senior to other individuals. Al is going to discuss that in more detail later on as we go through the workshop. But however, you need to make sure there's safeguards in place for that. Dependence on cooperation. Obviously, individuals who are involved in informal conflict resolution, the the ability to have that to be effective, you have to be willing to participate, number one, in it, but more importantly, willing to compromise in some instances when you get additional information, which we will discuss later on. And finally, like anything else, there's no precedent for it. There obviously it's not a court where you said, okay, this thing happened before, so I can deal with it now. This is what we did. And oh, by the way, because it's confidential, the information you provide as far as that having precedent moving forward. The closest that would come would be just within you yourself that no one dealt with this in this manner, so I may deal with it in that manner moving forward. But that is a definite drawback with informal conflict resolution.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. So let's take a moment and look at, kind of dig a little bit deeper into the seven concepts or seven components of conflict. And one of the things we wanted to do is we look at how we have and how we engage in some of these situations based on maybe communication breakdowns or even our emotions. So really helping to define what they are will help us to be more effective in addressing them. So as we go through the next few slides, I'll have an opportunity to give more of a deeper dive on how each of them impact us. So we'll start off with the perceived incompatibility. And I think about a time growing up, and I don't know, many of you have probably not had this experience as a youngster, but I spent a considerable amount of time in the principal's office. Not because we had a great social relationship, but because I was referred there by somebody who was trying to give me an opportunity to excel and be better. Fast forward to that, thinking about your parents when they called you by your whole name and what that represented. So when we're in a workplace or dealing with a colleague and we have to go to a supervisor's office, oftentimes we have this perceived kind of incompatibility or belief or a value that I'm in trouble. Anytime I have to go to the boss's office, principal's office, or if my parents call me by my whole name, I'm in trouble. And sometimes we go in there and we are working with a false assumption, what I call false evidence, based on our lived experience, an opportunity to have greater insight and greater communication as it relates to that, to look for clarity. Now, when we move on from that, we think about interdependence. And interdependence, to me, is really interesting because sometimes when we work on projects together, I think all of us want to get to the same space. And we say, well, it's not so much that we're in disagreement, is that right now our beliefs or our intent are kind of not aligned. So how do we begin to have those conversations and bring that back? We also think about how each of us play a role in that. And if we believe that somebody is not holding their own and sustaining that, then that potential conflict can happen. But again, it's about how do we create an opportunity to align with the assignment is. I always call it the assignment. And then when people do well, I want to thank them. And I acknowledge them for thank you for understanding and completing the assignment. Now we go to the next slide, please, and talk a little bit about the communication breakdown. This is one of the big ones. You know, when we think about, you know, communication is more than just the words that we say, it's nonverbal. So if I was to reach out and look at the audience here, ma'am, can I ask you to stand and sing the national anthem?
Right now?
Yes. Okay. No, no, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. Yes, no, I know you are, but if you notice, the first thing that she did was smile. And oftentimes, one of the things that leads to greater miscommunication and misinterpretation is reading of body languages. I'm sure if she was, I'm sure, thank you, ma'am, you would have been happy to do that. But typically, what happens is our first defense mechanism when we're uncomfortable or nervous is to smile. When with the basic training and the drill sergeant the drill sergeant was in us giving us words of encouragement, not really, he was really chewing us out. And he would ask, what are you smiling at? And I don't know what else to do. It just lighten us up right now. It wasn't that I was happy in the moment. Oftentimes we read and misinterpret cultural norms and other body languages as something that fuels an unnecessary conflict versus asking the question, I notice that twitch or that movement. Can I check in with you? What did you hear me say? Something as simple as, what did you hear me say? And there's a lot of acronyms out there. The military is notorious with acronyms. And I remember for a long time, I sat in a meeting and my father would tell me as a young officer, and you're tall as well, and you're a person of color, that you automatically assume you're stupid when you walk in the door, so don't ask any questions. When you open your mouth, know what you're talking about. And for months, I listened to that, and then I realized I don't know what's going on. Maybe I need to ask the questions. And when I asked the questions, there were other officers of all races and genders that said, I'm so glad you asked that question because I didn't answer either. So it's an opportunity to really engage and begin to have those conversations and ask the questions. Next slide. Let's talk about emotions at work. As an EEO person, typically what happens is when we have these types and frustration and anger gets involved, then people do things that are not rational. Like, do not respond to an email when you're angry, right? Do not ask questions. We had a saying, there's one of the things we used to say is, think about what you're going to say, how you're going to say, how you're going to ask it. Basically, do no harm. And do no harm means I need to ask myself, is this question I'm going to ask or this response I'm going to give going to hurt the person that I speak to or hurt our relationship? And if the answer to either one of those is yes, do not ask the question at that time, because it means that right now, stability in terms of your relationship. And there's also a thing about emotional intelligence. We have to be mindful of hearing what people say in the midst of a conflict. We did a scenario the other day in a training that I work with some first responders, and it was about the community responding back, about them not being as assertive or consistent with the service in their communities. And one of the firefighters said, hey, listen, we got to deal with this because I live in these communities and my neighbors are saying, how come y'all don't show up on time? And the firefighter was responding to the people, to the citizens, and telling them they're going to do better. And I was like, but you missed an opportunity because you had an employee that said, I'm feeling this. So sometimes it's important to listen with an empathetic lens. We call that human-centered leadership, where yes, we have to have compassion, empathy, but there's also accountability. But we need to be able to listen to that and acknowledge that there are emotions in the room. The next one is interests and needs. And I really like this one because when you think about interests and needs, it's funny. It's sometimes people feel like it's all about me. You probably have some colleagues, people that you work with that want to get promoted, and they'll do anything they can and they'll leverage you. You have to understand where people are coming from and what their needs are. And everybody who's there with you is not there for you. And we have to acknowledge that in terms of how we deal with conflict. And sometimes I would tell people it's better to know and not to say anything than to know and respond, right? So you know who these folks are and who their character are. We just have to learn how to navigate that, to mitigate that conflict possibility. But it's always going to be there. And then I always would say values and interests. Next slide, please. I hope I didn't mess up and not say next slide last time. Did I do that?
You missed it before, but that's okay.
That's okay. I hope that they caught up.
You caught up with you.
All right. So we talk about values and identity. There's a thing that when we think about conflict resolution and we do solutions for folks, there's an old saying that we have, don't do anything for us without us. Don't do anything for us without us. Meaning that if we're trying to resolve an issue with an individual, don't assume that you know the answer and that you try to resolve it. You have an opportunity to say, how would you like to see it? And Sam is going to give you some valuable tools and strategies moving forward. But I just wanted to make sure that we did this. And last but not least, and I'm going to say it first, next slide, is the power dynamics.
You remind me.
Yeah, and Sam also is going to deal with that. But how many times have you asked the question, why did we do that? Do it that way? And that's the way we've always done it. And we're dealing with a new younger generation that wants to know why. And the other generation doesn't want to go back and do the homework sometimes and tell you why, because we did it because we were told to do it, and why don't you just follow suit? Well, that power dynamic creates a space where it alters psychological safety, right? When people don't feel safe coming to a place, They don't want to speak up or say anything. They want to be viewed as you are the troublemaker, right? You are that unicorn. So we want to create a space where psychological safety can thrive and people can do things without psychological safety just basically says, I can ask questions and contribute without fear of being humiliated. When we think about psychological safety and have that balance, and yes, silence is a tool, but silence can also be a weapon. So it's, it's knowing when to be quiet and when to speak up. And I think those are the important things as we talk about, and Sam is going to give you some unique opportunities and some insights on how to utilize those things. So with that being said, I'm going to go to the next slide.
Okay, now let's talk about the practical aspect of the informal conflict resolution. Next slide. Remember earlier when Al talked and he spoke about effective listening, communication breakdown? This is probably one of the most important things in informal conflict resolution is effective listening. Okay. The reason why that's important is that once that individuals know that you heard them, you understand what they are saying. They kind of dismiss the fact that you didn't agree with them because you didn't understand. But you have to show them that you understand. You can totally understand and totally disagree with what they're saying. But you have to understand what they're saying. The next thing you need to focus on is the facts versus judgments. And it's a critical thing, the facts. Okay. Facts can be clarified, verified, and measured. That means you have a baseline. But facts can be hard to pin down. So my question to you is, why is facts hard to pin down? Can someone answer that for me?
Am I putting my personal perspective on it?
Yes, absolutely. You sure can. And I will try and relay that to.
I'm thinking about that in terms of what my experience is,
Yes.
that information.
Okay.
I get messed up each time.
You get messed up each time?
From my point of view. I know it's a fact.
Right. It's from your point of view. Yes.
But that may not have been my experience, and especially not in that moment.
Yes. So what she said is facts are hard to pin down because it's coming from her point of view. And she's somewhat correct. Think about this. Two people saw a wreck. Have you ever, anybody seen the movie?
I love it.
Okay, all right, awesome. Two people can see a wreck the same time, the same exact thing, but however, their eyewitness testimony is totally different. Totally different. So how do you handle that? Well, one of the things is if there's a disagreement within the facts, okay, see what the person is seeing and how they make sense of it. So you understand what they are seeing from their perspective. The next thing you have to look at is what is motivating the other person. The reason why that's important is this. Think about this. What you may consider a hot-headed response to what you're saying, it may be something that you're thinking is a total, complete falsehood. But that may be that person's, how they view it and how they saw what the events that transpired. So you have to understand what is their motivation, okay? Attack the problem, not the person. Why?
I feel like when you attack the person, it removes one fact. Now it's using judgments and beliefs. And then it's easy for the person, especially if you're trying to resolve a conflict, for them to get like kind of like, wow, this is very personal. It's nothing to do with the problem. And you kind of lose sight of the conflict that you started the whole conversation with.
They're gonna be defensive and close off.
Absolutely. And both are correct. The defensive side and you're right on the other side. And here's the thing. You attack the person. If you attack that person, and that person you still may have to work with, that person you may still have to follow your orders. That person you still may want to have a relationship with. So when you attack the person, take away that because that person now is going to be totally upset with you. You no longer have that relationship or that you have with that person. So that's why it is totally important to attack the problem, not the person. Next slide. And if you had noticed, there were two on that last slide that is transferred over to this slide, which is preparation. How do you prepare for something like an informal conflict resolution? First thing, you got to get organized. Go over the information in your head, how you see it. Keeping in mind that this information is from your perspective, how you see it. Understand how you want to say it to that person. How do you want to articulate what that issue is about? Okay. Get any documents. In fact, in some instances in the past, I remember one instance with my brother that we had an issue and I wanted to discuss it with him. I thought about it in my head. I wrote some notes down. I even thought about some of his responses. So if I think about how some of his responses, I am able to respond back to it. Okay? Understand the dispute in your head. But here's something. Think about the things in the dispute that are important to you. However, think about what in the dispute is important to the other person also. Keeping in mind that there's two sides to this dispute. Okay? Also, think about some of the other possible responses. Set goals. What do you want out of this informal resolution as you sit down and talk to that person? What is your expectation? But set realistic expectations. Be flexible. Why? That's my question to my next question. Why do you need to be flexible when you sit down with an individual with an informal dispute resolution?
I think it's more about like if you're not flexible and you're set in what you think the outcome is, then you're going to let yourself down. Right?
Okay.
And I think if you start to let yourself down mentally, it kind of goes to the whole emotions part of things.
Okay. So
You
you're
need to be
saying,
very objective. about
okay.
it.
All right. So you're saying that you need to be flexible because if you expect it a certain way, you would let yourself down. Yes.
Yeah, so, simply emotions removed, objectives defined.
Right.
Right?
Right?
If you're not flexible, you risk achieving your objective.
Right.
So
Okay.
when you define the objectives and find flexibility in that objective, then you can.
Okay. In military terms, when you get your objective, you need to be flexible to get to that objective. Correct? Okay. Yes, but there's a little bit more nuance to it. Okay. You sit down and you're talking to this individual. You're having a discussion. There's a certain part of this discussion that you have no idea about. You don't know how they see the situation from their perspective. How often do you watch? It could be any court situation. In my case, it's mediation. I've mediated over 300 plus cases. And in that mediation, I go from one party and I listen to what they have to say. And I have something in my mind percolated. But then I go talk to the other party and I heard something totally different. Totally different. So now I have another perspective to bring into the situation. if you have an informal conflict resolution with an individual and you're not flexible, what happens when you hear information that you didn't know about? Now you have to change course, if you will, back to the like she was talking about. Okay? So be flexible if possible. Next slide. Conclusions reflect self-interest. Why would when you make a conclusion about something reflect self-interest? Anyone?
If I may,
Yes, absolutely.
also
Yeah.
think about when values collide, people divide.
Right.
So when we think about our self-interest and we think about what we want and how we want it, then it doesn't allow for greater flexibility. But like you mentioned on the previous slide,
Yes.
is an opportunity to look back and say, how can I better understand their perspective? Having conversations in order to understood versus to reply.
Agreed. You're looking at their perspective. But guess what? When we make a decision about for something and we hear information, what do? We are thinking about that to support what we just decide. We make the decision, and now we're looking for evidence, unbiased. I mean, it's supposed to be unbiased, but we're totally biased on because it is our conclusion. Okay, so we give that the most favorable interpretation. Okay, uh, move from certainty to curiosity. As we talked about this earlier, we talk about the other person's perspective. We talk about what the other person, how they see things. But how do you find that out? You have to be curious. Okay. You have to, that's the only way to bring yourself into their story. Because keep in mind that you're only aware of your side of the story. And what they say, there are two sides to every story. Okay. But however, when you're mad, when things go bad, especially within work or with somebody else, you're only thinking about how you see things. I want to talk to that person. I want to let that person know how I think and how I feel. We're going to talk this thing out. But you also have to understand that they are seeing things from a different point of view, if you will. Okay. So being curious lets you into their story. Fine. Next thing is to embrace both versions. It's hard to listen to be curious about what somebody else has to say when you're so sure that what you're thinking is the right thing. When you're thinking that this is my decision because this is how I see it. However, to have a resolution of this situation, you have to embrace both versions. Now, the mere act of understanding and embracing both versions doesn't mean that you have to agree with it. It also doesn't mean that you absolutely have to change your decision. However, when you hear that other part about being flexible, and now you bring that into your decision-making process, what you decide at that point in time, it may change, or it may reinforce, hey, I'm still going to go ahead and relieve that person from this position. But if you embrace both sides of the story, when you make that decision, that person respect it a little bit more. They at least know that you understand. They may not agree with it, but they understand that they have been heard. And you can implement your decision, if it's a decision, in that manner. If it's another type of decision, you can still make it, or you can just change your mind based on the information that you just received. Next slide.
Habits. Ready to turn is like,
Yeah. Pathways to conflict resolution. Why? Okay, let me rephrase that question. Can you use an email to send to someone when you have an issue with them on a certain matter? Yes, no, why not? And I'll try and repeat your answers so the online audience can hear.
You wanna do that in person, face to face?
So you're saying that no, you shouldn't use email because you want to do it in person, face to face. Okay?
I think
Yes.
I think especially if you come from a place of curiosity. not
Yes.
from, Hey, you did this, like, hey, I saw that this happened.
All right.
Why, can you tell me something what the thought process was? I think
Right.
that sometimes face to face can come off confrontational.
Yeah.
Obviously, for warriors, depending on your language,
Yeah.
you know, can facilitate a conversation and kind of root the emotion, because I don't have to see your body language, I don't have to see that, I just hear the facts based off of my emotion.
So what she just responded was that if you use email, that especially if it's confrontational, that you can go ahead and take that emotions away from it, and you can have the facts discussion. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Having more trying to come from curiosity versus.
Curiosity to. Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, just from my experience, the email, all the people around, we use this email. My experience has been, no matter something in writing, how you might not have it worded correctly, their interpretation of what you have in writing can be totally wrong from what you send out. And you don't have that opportunity to explain. And so when you get together, this person has already developed their mind, how you coming across, and it'd be totally wrong. So that's been my experience.
So what Willie said was that you need to meet that person in face to face, because the way they may take what you send them via email, they may take it the wrong way. Correct?
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, I live by this rule that kind of says the same thing. Email sent does not mean email read.
Right.
Email read does not mean email understood.
Okay. So what the other person said was email sent is not email read, and email read is not email understood. Correct? Okay. My suggestion, and again, it's just a suggestion, I would not put a single thing in email that I have to discuss with someone that's that important. Al just spoke earlier about what? Nonverbal communication. How much of our communication is nonverbal? Most of it. I did some, and I tried to be conservative, but I did a quick check-in before I did this workshop. 93% of our communications are nonverbal. 55% facial, 38% tone of voice, body language, that sort of stuff. Okay. For practical purposes, my suggestion, with few exceptions, once that emotion gets into it, okay, no matter how clear that you write that email, how succinct you want to be, think about this. That person is already emotionally agitated, and they're going to take it, guaranteed they will take it the wrong way. Case in point, again, and I use this from personal experience. My brother sent me an email for something that he had an issue with. And when he sent it, I looked at it, and steam started coming up from my head. And I thought about it, and I decided I will use informal conflict resolution, just like I am explaining to you. I thought about how I want to talk to him about it. I thought about how I want to handle it. And my first question to him was, you sent me an email. Could you explain to me what your thoughts are and what was going through your mind that I should get out of this email? Because he sent in that email, I did not get. After he explained to me what his thought process was, I still didn't get it because it was already in my head how I saw what he was trying to tell me. So once emotions are involved in the issue, face to face, all right, you can see the person nonverbal response. Oh, by the way, if they're getting agitated, you can tone it down, calm yourself down, ask questions, get them to talk to you, and let them talk it out. Understand, shake your head, effective listening about what's going on. So as a result, you tone the pressure down because you want, when this thing is all over with, to have what? A relationship with that individual, whether it's work, home, or family. Oh, no, I'm sorry, back up. I feel statements. Why should you start a statement in a conflict resolution with I feel? You start a statement, well, I feel da 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 da. Why should you start that? Why should you use that? Super important.
You're saying we should.
You should. I'm saying you should. Why should you?
I statements take ownership and the feel is your feeling instead of assuming statement of fact or assuming both people agree on what you're about to say. So I statements are ownership.
What she said is I statement takes ownership and it comes from your opinion about how you see it from the facts, correct? Okay. And you're absolutely correct. You say, I feel. What can somebody not do when you say that? They cannot disagree with you because that's how you feel. You're not condemning, you're not blaming, you are just letting them know this is how I feel. It's coming from your viewpoint. Okay. It tones the pressure down now. Okay. In fact, in some cases, it might make that person more sympathetic to you because said, oh, I didn't know you felt that way. You ever heard that one? Okay. That's why I feel statements are so important. But here's another statement you can use. Okay. It seems like, and stop right there. It seems like you're upset. Stop. Full stop. Don't continue on. It seems like you don't feel good. That person would normally respond to that. A normal person, well, I don't say normal person, but most individuals would respond to something like that. It seems like you're upset. On that upset, and now you're eliciting a response, especially if they do not want to talk. They're not getting out, you're not getting from them what they're saying or what they're trying to say, the emotion, if you will. And finally, on this slide, on the part with conflict resolution, focusing on blame. Should you focus on blame? One person here says no. Do I have any yes? Okay. Absolutely should not focus on blame. What happens when you focus on blame? Anyone?
People become more combative.
Yes, they do. He said people become more combative. You're absolutely correct. When someone becomes more combative now, what you've just lost that opportunity to tone it down. Okay? Blame doesn't help anything. It doesn't help you looking backwards. It doesn't help you moving forward. It doesn't do anything for the situation. So don't focus on blame. All right? It's just a waste of time. It is always a roadblock to reaching an agreement because the person is defending themselves now. If you blame me, I want to defend myself. So where are you coming to get that person to get to an agreement? Yes. You had a question?
No.
I answered it? Okay. All right. I will move to the next slide. How am I doing time?
Good.
Good. Next slide.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Hold on. There's a question here.
So I think when it comes to focusing on blame, this is more just like conversational.
Yes.
I think there is focusing on blame or focusing on ownership. Because I think sometimes, specifically in our line of work, we need to figure out where the problem actually sprouted from so we can fix the problem It's not just blaming somebody, but when you're
Yeah.
like, hey, who owns this problem that just happened?
Right,
So-
hold on, so I can refer to
Yeah.
the online audience. What he said was focusing on blame vice focusing on ownership, right? And in some professions, you need to find out who has ownership of this issue, all right, vice blaming someone on it. Is that kind of what, did I get just what you're saying?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, absolutely correct. If you, there's a fine line though, between focusing on ownership of what happened and focusing on blame. Because remember, the biggest thing you want to find out is how do we resolve this situation? Or how can I have a discussion with you about this situation?
If I
Yes,
may,
absolutely.
to that point, you indicated blame.
Yeah.
I also look at accountability. So maybe we, both of us, felt that we were correct in the processes that we took, but when we get that alignment correct, then there's one way to do it. So now it's about, I'm not blaming you for accountability, so we can move forward in this process. So blame is a heavy word.
Yes.
Accountability is heavy too,
Too.
but blame has a more of a
Negative.
Negative connotation, yes.
Accountability is about moving forward.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, barriers to resolution. Some of the main problem that hinders a resolution. Of course, human perception, we talked about that earlier, correct? How they see it versus how you see it. Totally different. Okay. Emotion, as Al spoke to when he talked about emotion work. Okay. Most people are driven by their emotions. And you have to consider that throughout this process, that folks are emotional, especially when there's a conflict. And some people kind of express themselves in a certain manner, in fact, trying to communicate to what's going on. Okay. Next one, we talk about a blame focus. All right. It's not going to help you. It's a barrier, definitely. The importance of self-image or face saving. If that individual don't think that what's happening is fear, they will hold that grudge. Understand? They will hold that grudge. Okay? So you cannot disregard the importance of self-image. All right? Appeal to the other person's better self. Okay? And understanding that individuals that they see things differently, but you appeal to their better nature because what you're trying to do, you're trying to resolve this conflict. You don't want to, that's the reason why you're sitting down having this discussion. All right. Next slide. How do you define success? Can you force someone to change? Yes or no? I hear no, no, no. All right. Absolutely correct. You cannot force someone to change. If you try and force someone to change, you're defeating the purpose to begin with. You're just putting a lot of headache into your head because you cannot force someone to change. If you define success by that, you that individual control on the outcome of the situation. It's not about winning or losing. It's how you see it compared to how I see it, and let's see how we can go about fixing this situation. It's not about who's right. I have oftentimes when I'm at home and something happened, the wife would talk to my wife, says, "Oh, you're right, you're right." No, baby, I'm not right. It's just you just saw it a little bit differently than me. Okay. There's no right or wrong here. All right. Whether she takes like that, different story. Yes. Okay. The goal is to fix the problem. Okay. You have to do your best to show that and understand now that you've gotten all this information, is your actions and what you're saying part of the problem? Or are you somehow contributing to other persons how they respond back to you? that's why you're having this discussion, this informal conflict resolution. Okay. And if you do it in that manner, the person is going to understand that when this solution that you've reached, they were more apt to abide by it, even though you don't have an agreement. Even if you did something that was detrimental to that person's career, they will at least know that they were heard and understand, and they can move forward knowing that it was at least, okay, he was fair. I can't stand it, but at least he or she was fair about it. Okay. Next slide. Go it out.
Okay, so we're gonna take a moment here. Which component, as you think about what we shared with you, practical reflection, and you have this for those who are online and present, we should have received the link for an interactive participant guide. And you have an opportunity to kind of write your reflection. But which component do you think you encounter the most at work when you think about the components of conflict? Yes, please. You can answer yes. Okay.
I think about like I'm working in a space that I'm supervisor of multiple people that had multiple conflicts, and a little bit is a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like it's definitely miscommunication, but it's rooted in you hurt my feelings or you're offending me and this, and it's a lot. This is your fault. It's great.
Okay, so for those listening, so what was shared in the space, and thank you for that, was, and as a supervisor of a group of folks in a space, it's a lot of emotions, blaming, and it kind of really break down the communications. So that's one of the things that the most. Any others thoughts about in terms of which component of that communication piece do they encounter the most?
I'd say working at the Pentagon in general, everybody loves an email and everybody sends so many emails. And so I do think a lot of things get lost when it comes to trying to minimize conflict via just words on a screen. And so I've always been pretty big of like getting up and making my rounds in the morning to like go face to face everybody and figure out what conflict is happening in the day or throughout the DoD or throughout the world. Right. But I do think that when it comes to sending emails, one wants to go face to face. Nobody wants to pick up the phone and call anymore. And I think that's kind of a problem because things do get lost between them. Or like, hey, I sent you an email and you're like, well, I never saw it. So like nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like people just, I think what Sir said over there about, you know, an email sent is not an email understood or received.
Yeah.
That's very powerful. Email and then you follow up with a phone call and then you go to their desk.
There you go.
And you want to just paraphrase that real quick. You want
to? Basically, what he was saying is that in his position where he worked, is they send a lot of email, going back and forth. No one wants to have that conversation unless you send the email first and then follow up with a phone call. He reaffirmed the fact of what was said earlier, is that an email sent may not be an email received, and an email received may not be an email read. And that's a very powerful.
Yes.
And an email read is, an email read may not be an email understood.
And you know, and even thinking about, and thank you for sharing that, thinking about emails and about words, because words have meanings, but the tone, or I call it tonetics, for lack of a better term, is how we communicate and engage. I may walk over and say hi, and say hi, and then get over here and say hi. Said the exact same thing, right? I said the exact same thing, but people are watching, and I always have the saying that as a father of four, the children are always watching. Your staff, your colleagues, the people that supervise you, they're always watching. When they see something that's maybe not characteristic, or maybe they misinterpreted the intent, brings an opportunity for, if nothing else, questioning your actions and your steps, which could lead to conflict. So, you know, when we think about the conflict styles that you utilize, how do you think you can promote constructive resolution on your teams? Because we had one of our attendees shared about getting up and walking around in the morning and confirming, you know, asking people to get the email, having a conversation, having that follow up. You know, a lot of times when we have conversations and there's misinterpretations, I often like to use the tool of feedback, paraphrasing. What I heard you say was, and then that's an opportunity for them to clarify it in the moment. Also, even if you do use an email after a conversation, uh, first of all, I think a lot of people, my experience has been when people get an email from a superior or a colleague and they're paraphrasing a meeting or an event, it's like, oh, you're trying to document everything, right? They'll look at you like, okay, this is a trap, right? So let's be mindful of that, right? But also it's a mechanism to say, this is what we both talked about. And and if I didn't get it right, I'm asking you to please respond because I want clarity. You have any other points you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I'm good. There is, you finished the spot.
No, I have not.
Well, once you get to that, then I want.
Okay.
to do a couple
So,
of-
so just think about it in your IPG. How can you promote constructive, resolutions within your team? And just think about some simple things you can do. In the morning, I get it. I check in with people. When I wake up, I walk around the talk to the team members. I believe that in the Army, we call it the back 40 leadership. We go in the motor pool and we check on everybody and just make sure everybody's doing okay. Because there's an old saying that people are more responsive to you. People don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. So having those types of conversations at that level and creating a space where they feel safe to share their feedback is important. So when we think about, next slide, please. The key takeaways, we wanted to really just give you, let's say one, it's not when, it's not if when it happens.
Is when it happens.
Conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. It just kind of asking you to start to prepare yourself of how you deal with it. And I promise you, you won't always get it right. And give yourself grace for that. You will not always get it right, but there's opportunities because there's no one way to do it. The next one is understanding the 7 different components of where conflict kind of resides and where it manifests itself, and being able to identify what that one is so you can come up with the proper solutions. But then look at it from an optimistic way. Look at it in a way that it can only make us better, right? We get from the root methodology that you may see the polished product in front of you, but believe me, there were a lot of things I had to break through some soil. And so we go all the way back and figure that piece out. And when someone's upset, you may have to go back with them and part of that journey and say, I said this to you. Why did that upset you? And there could be something along their journey that led them to be in that space.
Okay, I will leave you with a couple of books to read. This is where I got a lot of my information. There's a couple more, but it's not on the screen, so I will have to tell you what they are. All right. One of them is it's called Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Ury. It's from the Harvard Negotiation Project. It's not a big, it comes in a paperback, very small, okay? And it makes it interesting reading. And trust me, you'll find a lot of there. Another one is called Difficult Conversations. This is by Bruce Patton, Douglas Stone, and Sheila Heen. You will find a lot of antidotes there. A very good book to read you as you move forward in the process. And understanding, like Al said, is not if, it's when. And when I say when, some of the things that we've talked to you about today is not just for work. It's every day. Like I told you about some of the antidotes from my own personal life that I've used some of these same techniques. So hopefully we've given you enough to think about and give you a good opportunity for growth. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No takes.
The test,
No test.
no, the test will be right before you leave, and if you don't pass, you can't go home. Come on, it's a kid. Thank you. What's up? I am. I had no choice. The general, board,
All right. Your
I-
phone is